Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session of Connected Inc. As we join Dave Zaboski, the former Disney animator and current Chief Creative Officer of Laetro, for his talk entitled The Universal Laws of Creativity. My name is Pamela Park, and I will be hosting today's event. I have been the email marketing and influencer programs manager for Wacom Americas for the past 16 years, and I've had the honor of working with some of the world's finest creatives, including Dave, whom I met for the first time at Lightbox last week. Let's see. If you have any questions for Dave, please put them in the chat, and I'll capture them and answer them when it's available, when it's the best time to do it. And now for what you came for. It is my great pleasure to introduce today's guest, Dave Zaboski. As a former Disney animator, Dave has a wealth of experience in the field of creativity. He has worked on some of the most beloved animated films, including Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, Aladdin, Pocahontas, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, and Fantasia 2000. This is a rare chance to get creative insights from an industry veteran from the second golden age of animation, as this is a version of the same presentation Dave gave to countless incoming artists during his time at Disney. Dave has been a mentor to many aspiring artists and has helped them to develop their skills and find their unique creative voice. In today's presentation, Dave will be sharing his insights into the universal laws of creativity and the tools and practices that can help us build a culture of creativity in our lives and organizations. Dave will discuss the importance of following a path to mastery and the role that creativity can play in our personal and professional growth. We're thrilled to have Dave as a speaker at this year's Connected Inc. event, and we look forward to hearing his thoughts on the creative process. Thank you for joining us. And there were some housekeeping things I was supposed to tell you. If you want to ask Dave a question, please put it in chat, and I will capture it, and we can do a Q&A after the session. Okay, thank you, Dave. Take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Pam, and it's really a delight. I'm honored to be here. I'm super grateful. We love Wacom. I'm sitting in front of a beautiful Wacom tablet right now, and so thank you so much for that warm introduction, and I'm really happy to be here. All right, so let's get started. Let's talk story. So let's start from the beginning, shall we? Let's go back 14 billion years to the very beginning of this universe. I know it seems like a long time ago, but I'm going to catch you all up here in a couple of minutes, so bear with me. All right, so 14 billion years ago, it's kind of when story started. There was this moment that there was this flash, and the scientists are fond of saying, give us one act of magic, and then we'll take it from there. So 14 billion years ago, there was this kind of abracadabra, and then pow, the universe exploded into being, and all of these particles and gases and little things started racing for the corners of the infinite. And then let's say about 8.5 billion years ago, all of that debris in this sort of corner of the galaxy started to congeal into this massive, glowing, burning ball. And then all of these spheres of gaseous planets and exoplanets and an Oort cloud. I don't even know what an Oort is, but there's a cloud of it out there. And then there was one of them is a planet upon which you are standing right now. On that planet, about 4 billion years ago, life emerged. This was another abracadabra moment. Magically, somehow, with some spark of the divine and the physical, life came into being. And when it did, man, it enthusiastically took off. And in the ensuing 4 billion years, there have been about 100 million species on this planet. 100 million forms of life vying for the air that we breathe, this rarefied air, swimming in the cool currents of rivers and streams and oceans, named and even long forgotten. Of those 100 million species, right now, there's probably about 10 million species on this planet. That means that in the 4 billion years that we've been here, 90% of the species that have been on this planet have gone extinct. 90% of all of that life trying to figure out how to work this place has gone and will never return. And I would say of those 10 million that are left, there's only one species in 100 million that has been able to have an experience, codify that experience in some kind of language, turn that language into knowledge, take that knowledge, mold it into wisdom, and with that wisdom build culture. Yeah, I know. I'm gonna kind of give that away. It's us. We're the only species that we know of right now that is capable of telling stories. And stories change culture. They change our minds. They change our hearts. They can change our lives. And so I'm here today to talk about this piece that we have, that we carry with us, that is so powerful that it's changed the world. And I want to share with you this idea because our stories lead to what we believe. They create a culture through this codification of experience into knowledge, into wisdom, into culture. And that's how we believe in things. And the way we believe in something is how we create. So when I talk about the universal laws of creativity, which we'll get into shortly, it really starts with how do we believe in something? And how does that belief enact our creativity? And so let me give you a little example. And by the way, welcome to my studio here. I would invite you to keep your eyes open because there's a white rabbit that runs around here. And so if you're distracted by that, that's Rory, and he runs this joint. All right, so because we believe, we create. And so let me tell you a little story from the philosopher Stephen West, who shares this story about how believing is actually how we create. And we've often thought that seeing is believing, but maybe it's the other way around. Maybe believing is seeing. And so it goes like this. So imagine you find yourself in a dire situation. Like, let's say you're being chased by a ravenous bear. Now, you can't outrun the bear probably. And then as you're running ahead of you, you see this chasm. This chasm, man, if you can jump over it, well, then you can escape the clutches of this ravenous bear. And here's where it gets interesting. If you don't believe that you can jump over this chasm, well, you won't try. And the possibility of your success does not exist in any reality. And so it would be a bad day for you if you didn't try. It would be not a terrible day for the bear, but it'd be a pretty bad day for you. Now, if you believed that you could jump over this chasm, even only slightly, if the smallest amount of belief was there, and you made the attempt and the successful outcome happened, that successful outcome was only possible because belief was present. And so believing is a non-trivial attribute to the reality being enacted, right? You have to believe to make it so. And if you don't believe me, I mean, look around you. Your room is filled with things that people believed was possible. This very video call was akin to magic back in the day. In fact, Arthur C. Clarke, I'm sure you heard, famously said that any sufficiently advanced technology is going to be indistinguishable from magic. And so when you look around, there are abracadabras all around you. There are people believed in things, and then they made those things. And so, my company, Laetro, the company that I'm working with right now as a chief creative officer, we kind of did the same thing. I mean, if you've ever been in a startup or started a company, you have to believe first. And that belief is catalyzed by a story. And we looked at the ecosystem that was out there of getting creative work for companies. And you either had freelancers on one hand, or you had agencies on the other. So you could either do it yourself or have it done for you. And then we thought, could we create a system where you could do it with you? And in that space, we aggregated 500 elite creatives on the supply side. We work with companies on the demand side, and we believe that bringing them together in a way that is do it with you could be a workable solution for that ecosystem, the poles of that ecosystem. And so when we do it with companies, when we share our creative ideas with companies, we begin to talk about the technology of creativity. That how do we get creatives to work with companies, and how do we get companies to work with creatives in the same way that we did at Disney? And so when I got started at Disney, they were hiring 2 or 3 people a year. I was in a kind of Project Runway internship, and I ended up getting one of those 3 spots. I had to slit a few throats to do so. Okay, now that's kind of Aladdin thing, right? If you've seen Aladdin, I didn't actually murder any. I was never convicted. That's a line from Aladdin. All right. So I can't see anybody. I'm gonna assume that you're all giggling at that. Um, so so this brings us to the how we use the technology of creativity when we work with companies. And so let me share with you that when I was there at Disney, we got this talk from one of the top animators there that for me made the difference between being an amateur and being a pro. It was not so much just the principles of animation, squash and stretch and silhouettes and charm and things like that, but it was also the principles of the animator, like not just how to make things, but how to make the maker. And everybody there was committed to be on a track to mastery, to find that path that could fulfill your creative dreams and desires and give you practices, tools, and systems so that you could replicate powerfully the things that you're creating. And so when I talk about a technology of creativity, in fact, before I left Disney, I was the one giving that talk to other younger artists, and it's the talk that I'm going to share with you right now. This idea of the technology of creativity is that we often think that technology is something that you plug in. I'm going to plug this thing into the wall, and that's where my technology comes from. But I want to invite you to think about the idea of technology as really just tools, systems, and practices that allow you to get replicable results. And so as a creative, you want to be able to get replicable results. You want to be able to build your skills and know that when you are in a process that the results are going to return. And so we at Disney, you couldn't say, oh, it's Tuesday, I don't really feel like creating today. You had to have a kind of practice that allowed for you to enact your creativity, your job as a creative, the same way a lawyer would do their job as in lawyering. And so I'm going to share with you the universal laws of creativity. And I know we just talked about the universe a minute ago. It's a big thing. It's 14 billion years old. And you're going to be like, oh, there's universal laws of creativity? Pshaw. Let me share with you a little bit of a story. I was in this kind of psychic eye bookshop many years ago, and I pulled down this book by this 14th century poet called Hafiz. This book's called The Gift. It's a Daniel Lindinsky translation. And I flipped this open. I thought it looked like an interesting book. I flipped this thing open and I found a page, and it said, "The universe knows only 4 words." And I thought, okay, come on. I mean, it's the universe, right? What do you mean it knows only 4 words? And then I read on and it says, the universe knows only 4 words. Come dance with me. And I thought for a minute, you know what? I'm totally down with those 4 words. And so this is my invitation to you to come and dance with me as we explore these universal laws of creativity. There might be 5, there might be more, maybe there's less. I want to invite you to listen for how these work in your life. These universal laws have tools and practices and systems that go with them. We're going to talk about the level of discovery now in these 5 universal laws of creativity that allow us to create in what I kind of call a slow magic. Fast magic is this your card? A slow magic is what we do as creatives, to take a thought and turn it into a thing. It's still abracadabra. And in fact, if you listen, if you look at the term abracadabra, what it actually means is I create as I speak. So we think of it as magic, but abracadabra is really I create as I speak. And so we've already covered this first universal law of belief. I'll go a little bit more deeper into that in a minute. But maybe I'm going to share my screen here and show you a little bit of a chalk talk about how I think about the creative process and how we get from where we are to where we're going. So let's say we're going to start here. These are the universal laws of creativity with a flourishing underline. And we're going to start right here with the thought. And then out here in time and space, somewhere is the thing. So we start with this thought, I'm going to make something. And then there's this thing out there that we're going to make. And so we feel like, all right, so I'm going to plan this thing out. I'm just going to make this thing. Here's what the path is going to look like. I'm going to go from thought to thing. And then we get started. And what happens? Well, life happens, right? And you get out here and you realize, oh my God, I'm so off track of what my plan is. And then you race back to get back on it and you overshoot. And then you're like, oh no, I got to get back. And your whole process is sort of this zigzag process, trying to stay on track, but never really quite following that path that you thought was the plan. And then you finish here out of time and money and enthusiasm and, I don't know, maybe some friends, right? Does this sound familiar to you? Is this is kind of how we create normally, and we can get pretty far. I'm going to assume, since I can't see y'all, that you're all nodding enthusiastically to this, and I know that this is how I got to Disney. I mean, you can get pretty far this way. One of the challenges with this, and there are many, is that it makes it hard to believe in what it is that you're doing. It particularly makes it hard to believe that this thing right here is perfectly possible. You're pretty sure that this is possible, but this, I don't know. I haven't ever really gotten there. We get good accidentally this way. It's hard to stack your skills on the things that you learn when your life is filled with happy accidents. Those are wonderful. Don't get me wrong. I love happy accidents, but I want replicable results also. And that's the other piece, is that it's kind of hard to grow this way. Like, how do I know how to compare myself to last month or last year when a lot of my process is really kind of random? So these universal laws come in to really help us cultivate practices for mastery. And so let me share with you what they shared with us at Disney that for me made a huge difference. And it goes like this. So here's your thought right here. And here's your thing out there in time and space somewhere. Could you create, the creatives at Disney said to us, could you create more organically? Could you listen to the winds, and could you create with the same energies that power the universe? The energies that have been around for 14 billion years, abracadabraing everything. Could you create with the same energies that pull that glowing orb through space to who knows where, that drag impossibly small particles through the infinite densities of the earth without even touching them? Energies that make a rose bloom or a cactus grow. And if you did, you would start here with your thought, and your thing would be out here, and you'd go at it like this. Now that is how the universe do. Inside of this, when I first saw this, I was like, oh, wait a second. There's another way other than this like sputtering moth to the flame course of zigzagging all over the place. And so if I look at things this way, then I start to see this as a map of the creative process. And when I have this map, I can cultivate practices that keep me on it. And the first thing that I recognize is that if I am going to create, what I've got to do is I've got to believe that this is possible. And so belief becomes that very first universal law of creativity. To believe, well, there's practices that we use to believe. And some of them are, there's lots of different ones. I'm going to tell you the best practice to engender belief is telling a great story. So learning practices for storytelling, especially we as creatives, I don't think of myself necessarily as an artist. I think of myself as a storyteller with a lot of skills to be able to support those stories. And so we talked about this a little bit already, but the power of story is that as we believe, we create. Believing is actually seeing. So there are plenty of practices, plenty of tools to tell a great story. There's first act, second act, third act. There's thesis, antithesis, synthesis. There is the the pledge, the turn, and the prestige. That's what the magicians use. And if you want to see somebody who tells great stories, maybe study magicians. You know, they start with the ordinary, they turn it into the extraordinary, and then they finish with it being astounding. And so listen for your own stories and what are the practices that you can use to be able to tell better, more powerful stories. That's the first of the universal laws. The second is that we iterate. So powerful creation is iterative. You can't make that first line your last line. You have to phase up your ideas in stages, in passes. And I'm going to demonstrate that a little bit, but let me share with you the key to this one is to be committed but not attached. And so I want to pick a little pencil here, and I'm going to add a little layer. Oh, that's green, isn't it? Let's do kind of a charcoaly color here. Let me do this guy. How about that? All right. So to iterate is to understand the passes that you take to be able to phase up an idea. So let's say I'm going to do a drawing here of a face. Let's see, maybe I'm going to move that down here a little bit so it's out of the way of everything. All right, so I'm going to do this little face. I'm going to start with a pretty, standard way of doing things. Maybe there's a little jaunty smile here. Here's that. Some cheekbones in here. Here's the chin, jawline. So this is my first pass on this. He's got like anime hair coming in here like this. Maybe put the shoulder down here. Face this way. That arm goes out like that. All right, so that's my first pass. If I can think about my creativity in passes, then the thing is, here's what I know. I know I can draw. So I don't have to care that much about what lines are right and wrong here, especially when I've got these forgiving media like, like this computer thing. Hey, by the way, what is the greatest invention known to humanity in the last 35 years? Control Z. I'm serious about that. The idea that I can go back in time and take another path, it's magic. All right, so this my phasing this up. So I'm going to take another pass. I'm not going to add that. Wait, I'm going to add this little layer here. And then I can come in on this next pass and I can start to refine some things and figure out like what is it exactly that I need, but based on the first pass. So each pass allows me to get closer and closer. And if I'm committed and not attached, then it doesn't matter if the lines that I make are not quite there. I'm going to keep this kind of scribbly in here. Here's my cheekbone, comes down here. And so being committed and not attached allows me to just keep building in ways that I get better because I keep what works and I throw out what doesn't. Oh, Control Z, yes. Right, so maybe on this pass, I'm also going to kind of map out like what are my shadow shapes here. I've got like maybe a cast shadow. There's like a little shadow on his cheek. Maybe I'm picking up a little bit of light there. That goes like this. Cast shadow down there. Then I can say pick a little bit lighter color. So here my shadow is going to come in here. And so each pass I take allows for me to get a little bit closer to that thing that I'm creating, and I can stay committed and not attached. And so I know that if I had 10 more passes or however many it takes, that I could get this closer and closer to, let's see, I'm not going to get carried away on this, but I am going to bring in, let's see if this helps me kind of do little smudgies in here. little smudgies. Smooth out that shadow. So the idea that I can allow myself to make some mistakes is really powerful. People look at my sketchbooks and they go, Dave, your sketchbook's amazing. You got 50 beautiful pieces on here. What they don't know is that my sketchbook came with 100 pages. And so I allow myself to iterate as I go. And that gives me some ability to be committed and not attached. I could continue. I could knock this back a little bit, and now I've got a really nice start to a drawing. If I had 10 more passes, who knows where I could take this? Well, I know where I could take this. I could make something pretty nice out of it. This is the idea of being able to be committed and not attached. So each iteration gets you closer as a universal law of creativity. All right, so let's move on to the third universal law of creativity. We've got a few things to say about this one, and that is that creators, we collaborate. Like, no big idea can you do by yourself. Everything that you create that's bigger than you is going to need a team. And I would invite you, whenever your peers are not your competitors, they're your collaborators. At Disney, we weren't competing with each other. We were competing with the incredible artists who came before us. When I was working on Pocahontas, I wasn't trying to be better than the artists around me. I was trying to do something that was as good as Jungle Book. And oh my God, that's the challenge. So to collaborate is to be additive to each other. And at Disney, we had this term called plussing. To plus was to be in service to the trajectory of the idea, not the ego that brought it. So one of the things that we know as creatives is that there are two engines that power our creativity. There's what we might call the left brain or the right brain. There might be the logistics and the emotion. So I know that I've got to have this be on time, on budget. I've got to use particular tools with it. Those tools have parameters that require a particular set of skills. And so there is a sort of structured logistics to my approach to creative. But it also has to feel right. It has to have heart. And so as much as the logistics are a powerful part of the engine that runs my creativity, so is my heart. So are my emotions. And I need to have the emotions operating just as powerfully as my understanding of the tools is. And so to plus each other is to be additive. And we recognized really early at Disney that if you were negatively critical to somebody who was creating, then you're going to damage that engine that they use to be able to create. And so you can't tell somebody that they suck and think that you're going to get good work out of them. It wrecks the engine, the part of the whole that causes good creative to happen. And so to plus each other is to be in service to the trajectory of the idea, not the ego that brought it. And so you look for practices to help you plus things. So the first that I'm sure that you're aware of is yes and. When we say yes and, we acknowledge the place of the idea, and the and allows us to be additive to it. Now, people say, hey, there's no bad idea, let's brainstorm. I mean, you guys have all been in a room like that. There are bad ideas. But what makes an idea bad? What makes an idea not effective is that it is not in service to the trajectory of the idea. And when you're in that place, then the conversations become easy to talk about how are we going to make this work? Thanks, Chuck. Your idea, Chuck says, hey, man, you never like my ideas. And it's pretty easy conversation there. It's like, Chuck, it's not you. It has nothing to do with you. Let's talk about this idea. If you can show me how this idea is in service to the trajectory of this overall thing that we're creating, then cool, knock yourself out. If it's not, it's going to be obvious. So it's not about you having good or bad ideas. It's about how are you serving the idea itself, the overall trajectory of that thing that we're building. Now, there's lots of practices to get deeper into this, figuring out what the values are of the thing that we're building. We do a lot of work with companies on what's the character that you are that your company is. Like if your company was a character, how would it take its dry cleaning in? How would it handle being splashed by a bus on a sidewalk? How are your values and principles expressing your actions in the world? And that is the story that you're telling, that story of the story of the storytellers. And when you're operating in that place, then you understand how to plus each other. And I will tell you that plussing at Disney was not just a tool that we used to work with each other, but it was a way to build culture. That when you live in a place where everybody has permission and is plussing each other, then the acceleration is amazing. And I say, and this is a bit of a mouthful, but the fastest accelerant to excellence is generous collaboration. So figure out how to share and be shared with, and that's your fastest way to get great at something. I also want to say that, there's this term called symbiosis. Symbiosis is the idea that two things coming together make something that's greater than the whole, or than the sum of their parts. There is an emergent quality. You might think about, like, let's say I have a metal bar. That metal bar, it doesn't have the property of containment. But if I put a bunch of bars together and I needed to keep something contained, then those bars together create an emergent property of containment. It's the same thing with symbiosis. Symbiosis is two things coming together to create something that is greater than the sum of its parts. That is the core goal of collaboration. And let me tell you that symbiosis, well, it's in your blood. So you want to go back 4 billion years ago, there was a thing called Luca, the last universal common ancestor. Shortly before that, there was a moment in the primordial soup when the mitochondria had a conversation with the cell. And you might remember that the mitochondria from your high school biology is the powerhouse of the cell, right? It's what turns ATP into sugars. It gives the energy, it gives the cell energy, allows it to live longer. But the DNA of the mitochondria is different than the DNA of the cell, indicating that sometime in our great distant past, just before Luca, they were separate. They were different. And so imagine the conversation was something like this. Mitochondria sidles up to the cell and says, "Hey, cell, how you doing?" And the cell frantically responds, "Man, I don't know. It's a mess here. I mean, I don't live long enough to really get anything done. And so, yeah, how's it going? I can't really tell you." And the mitochondria says, "Yeah, about that." Cell says, "What do you mean about that?" Mitochondria says, "I got this idea." Cell says, "Hit me, man, but make it quick." The mitochondria says, "Well, listen, what if you and I got together? Because I think if we did, we might be able to do some stuff." And the cell says, "Well, like what kind of stuff?" And the mitochondria says, "Well, you could live longer, and then you could differentiate and become different things. You could become a liver cell or a brain cell or a leg cell or maybe a wing cell." And the cell says, "A wing cell? Are you kidding me? Then what?" "Well, then," says the mitochondria, "we get together and then we differentiate into 100 million different kinds of species. And then one day we'd be sitting in this space listening to this long-haired guy rant about how cells get together and we could live in symbiosis and stuff like that. And then we're here." And so that's what happened. All that is to say that this idea that we think that there's a zero-sum game out there means that there has to be a winner and there has to be a loser, or that the Darwinian idea of survival of the fittest is how life and nature works. It's not. It's a misreading of Darwin's theories. It's not survival of the fittest, because if it were survival of the fittest, there'd only be one lion. And that's not the case. Symbiosis is in your very cells. It's in your blood. Your ability to collaborate is that great differentiator that caused us to build the things that we've built around us. And so I know we creatives, we artists, we like to work alone. We like to have our own thoughts. And I'm going to invite you that your greatest ideas will be built by being collaborative. And that symbiosis is in your very cells, and our ability to make a difference in this world is how we plus each other. That leads us to the fourth universal law of creativity, which is risk. You know, risk it's a universal law of creativity. You gotta risk. It's gonna happen. And it's not about like mitigating risk. And this is not like business risk where you got to do your due diligence and figure things out. It is just that you got to make a mark. There are tons of ways of taking risks. You know, use a pen or a brush pen in your sketchbook, but also find a collaborator, make a thing. Risk is an incredibly powerful tool when it's done in a healthy way. And so to do it in a healthy way means that you build trust. There are lots of practices for this. Incremental risk is one of them. Play is another. I remember recently seeing this doubles masters game in tennis, and these were masters, men's masters, doubles tennis, and they were playing each other, and they were going at it. And they were going at it so hard that at one point, this one guy reached to get the ball, and his momentum took him clear off the court and into the first row. And he arced away from the first row and came into the field of play on the other side. And suddenly the guy on that side recognized it, and he ran to the other side. And they kept playing this point in a game of around the world. And watching these masters play around the world was amazing, because they started to take these chances that they would never have taken if they were in a heated match, shooting it behind their back and under their legs, and reversed and left-handed, and it was hilarious. And it was also where they could take some chances and not have the stakes be so high that they could lose a point or lose some income. So play is a really excellent way to build some trust in ways that you can take risks on things and practice that payoff, so that when the time comes and your team has to leap, well, you're all ready for it. And that leads us to the last of the universal laws of creativity, and that is creators complete. They finish strong. And when you finish strong, well, what happens is you automatically, in that space, I'm going to add another little layer here. When you finish strong, you now are able to tell a story that takes you back to how you get people to believe in what it is that you're up to. When you have a strong finish on something, you have a strong story about what it is that you created, and that story can engender belief, and it closes the circuit on these universal laws. Now, there are lots of practices for how we believe and how we finish strong on something, and I'll give you a couple that come from the movie industry, for example. So, in the movie industry, the first way to complete something is to think about box office. Those are the numbers. We said 50 million. What did we do? Now, if we said 50 million and it comes out to 45 million, then the question, the sober analysis is, what did we miss? So to have to soberly analyze what you said and what you did is one of the practices for completing. By the same token, a really powerful creator will say, we said 50 million and we did 55 million. Sure, it might be cause for celebration, but it's also cause for that same question. What did we miss? If we want to really get our hands on the knobs and dials and levers of our own creativity, we want to be able to create as we speak. We want to be able to abracadabra this thing, and so that we say what we say is what we create. So that's the first of the practices. The second practice is acknowledgement. Simply saying thank you so much for that thing that you did. We're really grateful. And in the movies, you see it as credits, right? So the credits roll. And I mean, if you've sat through the credits in a Marvel movie, it takes 15 minutes for all the names to go up. But everybody gets credited. Back in the old days, it would say a film by Walt Disney. And now, even I'm sure you've seen on Pixar movies where the babies that get conceived and born during the movies get credit. I was at the premiere for Super Pets, and all of the pets, for anybody who worked on the film, they were also in the credits. And so I don't know, maybe that's a little bit overkill. Maybe the pets appreciate it. The point is that to acknowledge a contribution is a great way to finish strong on something. To say thank you so much for the amazing work that you did. We appreciate you. There's a gratitude and a gratefulness in that that allows for you to complete things and have no rubble that you build the next thing on. And then the last practice that we often see in the industry is celebration. And never underestimate the power of a party to put a pin in something and call it complete, right? We have wrap parties when a movie premieres. It's a great way to push it out into the world and to have something be born, and then it's on to whatever its next life is. So, sober analysis, acknowledgement, credit where credit is due, and celebration. So those are ways that we complete and we finish strong. And so I wanted to share all of this with you because I wanted to also point out that as we tell stories, there's an evolution to story happening right now. That that there's a Joanna Macy is this philosopher who says that every great crisis this earth has ever solved has been solved by profound acts of creativity. And these crises go back to long before we were even here. I mean, if you look at the mitochondria in the cell, did I tell that story? So the cell says, oh, wait, we covered that one. All right, the idea that these crises are solved by profound acts of creativity. I wanted to share these tools with you, these universal laws that you probably already have practices for, and then now you can look for more practices because the things that we face on Earth right now, the crises that we face right now can be solved by profound acts of creativity. That there's an evolution of story happening right now. We're in the middle of it. If you look at even just the idea of our heroes, you know, we've had the hero's journey in our zeitgeist for more than 50 years since Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell did that PBS special in the kind of late 70s. That we have had the hero's journey in our zeitgeist, but it's evolving. And that evolution we're in right now, and you are a part of it. And Joanna Macy, the philosopher, says that it's an evolution from the hero's journey, that thing where you get a calling, and then you meet some old guy, and that old guy gives you a mission, and then that mission takes you on an adventure where you have to vanquish a demon, dragon, bad guy of some kind. And from that vanquishing, you get an elixir that you carry back with you to your garden, and your hero's journey is over. Well, these days, you can't just take that elixir and go back to your garden. It's got to be a community garden. And Joanna Macy talks about this evolution as an evolution from the hero's journey to the kindred quest. And you can see it in our stories. All these singular heroes, you know, the Avengers are now grouped up. I wish they hadn't named themselves the Avengers, because now they're sitting around going, hey, man, did that guy just do that to us? Oh, he is in so much trouble. I mean, if they'd named themselves the Peacekeepers, maybe they wouldn't be so stressed out about things all the time. But the point is that all of those singular heroes that we knew and loved back in the day are teaming up. And we're seeing the power of collectives in storytelling now. And it's across the board. Just about every story, I'm inviting you to listen for that evolution. And all of the stories you can see are stories of the hero becoming the kindred quest. I just rewatched Ready Player One, and I think Ready Player Two is coming out pretty soon. And that's a classic example of the hero deciding to be a collective. Stranger Things, all of these stories now are stories of the kindred quest. And that's the evolution that we're in right now. And that's the invitation to you as amazing creatives to step into your own creativity, to help solve these crises through our profound acts of creativity. Because we are the storytellers. We have this 1 in 100 million species gift. What are you going to do with it? And I might borrow a little bit here from Mary Oliver. You know, our mythology right now is one of separation. There's some stuff going on in the world right now that comes from hurt people hurting people. We have a mythology that we're atomized, that this is a border and this is my world here, and that we are separate. But I will invite you to consider that we're in the fifth industrial age, the age of interdependence, where something can happen on one side of the world. A guy can leave a window open in Wuhan, or there's news report on this side of the world, and we all instantly know about it. We are in the age of interdependence, that we may have our sovereignty, but that sovereignty leans on something else. And our creativity is tied to the creativity of everybody else around us. That what one node knows, all nodes can know. And so for us to invite that evolution of story from that hero's journey to the kindred quest, that we have this 1 in 100 million species gift. And I was going to say, as I might borrow from Mary Oliver, what are you going to do with this one wild and precious gift? What stories are you going to tell with this gift that you have? Can you tell the stories of if it went well? Can you tell the stories of our success as a species or creators? What are you doing to make your creativity replicable, to build practices so that you can track that path to mastery? I think that that's what I really wanted to share with you today. And I think that I want to leave you with this, that as you speak, so do you create. I mean, abracadabra, right? So let's go plus this place. That's all I have for y'all. Thank you so much. It's been my honor to be here as a part of the Connected Inc.
Well, thank you
Back
very
to
much,
you.
Dave. Okay, me. So thank you very much for this wonderful talk. You've given me hope that the creatives might be the ones that can save humanity from ourselves. No one had a lot of questions. Your Control Z did resonate with a lot of people. And I would like to say, like, I know that you've carried your laws of creativity through your institution at Laetro. If you want to tell us more about Laetro and maybe how you're connecting with creatives in that regard.
Right. Right. Well, as I mentioned, Laetro is essentially a tech-enabled community of elite creatives, and we service enterprise companies with what we call best-in-class creative services. So, imagine a company needs a rebrand or a video or an ad or a blog post. They'll come to us. We will facilitate casting from our amazing cohort of entertainment industry artists and beyond, and build a team that helps them solve their creative issues. And we're not an agency, and we're not a bunch of freelancers. We're, in a way, a kind of freelance community. Now, one of the things that we've seen in the industry, in the entertainment industry in particular, is nobody's going to get a job necessarily for the next 40 years at Disney. It's just not going to happen. These jobs are short term. And so if you're freelance, you're not in a community. And if you're in a community, you're not really freelance. Is it possible to have a freelance community? And that's what we're building at Laetro, is this idea that you have mentors and peers and a connection so that you can build your skills with other amazing creatives and do good work in the world at your day rate. So what Laetro is essentially a tool that helps facilitate in between these creatives and these companies. We manage the agreements and the statements of work and production management, invoicing, and payment. We, from the start, and this is like a fantasy of mine, and it's working really nicely, but from the start, we pay our creatives the day they do the work. There's no net anything. You have a dashboard with all of the parameters for the particular job that you're working on, a brief, the team that you're working with, the client, it's all connected on a dashboard, which I also wish I'd had when I was doing more freelance. And then as soon as you log your hours, that money goes into your wallet and you can download it or leave it there or, build it up. But so you know what you have and what you're working for, and you get paid immediately.
Even your business model really speaks to like taking care of creatives and really ensuring that everyone is taken care of. It's really a beautiful business model.
Our mission is to see creatives flourish. And if people want to know more about it from either the business side or from the creative side, you can go to laetro.com. It's Laetro.com. Laetro. It stands for Maestros of Light, because we're all working in pixels these days. So it's laetro.com. And then there's for creatives, and then there's companies. Either way you want to come into the portal, we're happy to welcome you.
Thank you. We did have a comment from Tim. He says, creativity flows through us from the universe. The more we are tuned or trained or humble or aware, the more we can utilize that creativity. Collaboration is tuning into similar frequencies or disciplines.
That's beautiful, Tim. That's exactly it. Yeah, I often say, like, when we collaborate, and the most amazing creatives I have found to be the most generous, because they're super clear that my candle is not going to get dimmer if I light yours.
I wish that would carry through everything, just not even creatives only, but the entire world. I think it's so beautiful. And
yeah, I mean, I think that's our role, is to remind people of that, to be the storytellers, to tell the stories that empower and connect.
Yeah. And one last question was, Wacom asked, did you enjoy Clip Studio Paint?
I love Clip Studio Paint because of One with Bear. Sarah Jean is amazing. She's got through Wacom, she has this incredible tutorial series that I just super enjoyed. And so, yes, there's a lot of neat stuff on Clip Studio Paint. These are tools for us. There's a lot of cross-pollination from paper to Clip Studio to Photoshop to Procreate to whatever's next. The key is that I want to keep the skills in my hands, and that these are tools and media that facilitate my imagination coming real.
We have another question from Michael. Where do you think ownership of the work product needs to go? Work for someone, they've paid for it, they have some rights, but you still are the font from which it came. So where do you think the ownership of the work product needs to go?
Well, that's an agreement. There's lots of different kinds of agreements. I was worked for hire at Disney. I wish it hadn't been exactly like that. I worked on $5 billion worth of films. But I think it's always an agreement. If you are doing work for hire, then you get compensated at that level. If you want to keep your IP, you can also put that in an agreement. It's all about agreements. There's no standard boilerplate. How do you want to protect your work? Sometimes you just are paying the bills with illustration or with graphic design or things like that, and it's okay to give that product to somebody because that's what they're asking for. So there's lots of different ways of going about it. But again, acknowledgement is important. So how are you being acknowledged? If you don't think you're getting paid enough for work for hire, then ask for more.
Okay. Awesome. Any more questions? Put them in chat. Otherwise, I want to say thank you so much, Dave, for sharing your knowledge with us. If anyone has time, we do have another session at Connected Ink coming up. It is an animation. I have to look up what it is right now. It is a next session, which begins at 3:30, called Animation as Research, a new approach to climate change, presented by educators and students from the Penn Climate Animation and Research Studio. And then we do have another session on November 15th, which is The Art of Panchita, how Unsaid Studio made an animated film from scratch. So it was a Unsaid Studio volunteered to make this sort of animation to support the nonprofit TECO that builds emergency housing for people in Latin America that have been, struck by a typhoon or something like that. So they're trying to raise money for building homes for people that don't have them right now. So it's a beautiful story. Panchita is it's a short animated film, but it's really made with love. So it's the creative soul of all the people that we work with at Wacom really have a creative soul, and really, I think, Dave, you're the embodiment of that. You're our leader. I really, when I connected with you the first time, I really felt that connection and that really passion and love for creatives. And
well, me
gosh,
too with you, Pam.
Mhm.
This has been a total delight. I'm honored to be able to share. If people have questions, they can just contact me at Dave@Laetro.
Okay, Dave at
So it's just
Laetro or
Dave at Laetro.com.
okay, yeah. I welcome everyone to check Laetro out, and you won't be disappointed by what you find there. It's a very wonderful and supportive community. Well, thank you so much, and thank you guys for joining us at Connected Inc. And hope to see you again soon.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for Connected Inc. 2023. This is Wacom's celebration of all things art, education, technology, and creative chaos. My name is Megan and I will be your host for our next session. I'm the Senior Manager of Brand Experience here at Wacom, and I'm coming to you live from the Wacom Experience Center in Portland, Oregon. And like Pam, who hosted our previous session today, I have the honor and privilege through my job of working with some of the most amazing and creative minds in the world and the people that will inevitably take over and lead the path for creatives in the future. I'm excited to kick off our next session titled Animation as Research, a New Approach to Climate Change Research, where we'll learn all about the UPenn Climate Animation and Research Studio, which is a mobile animation studio that engages 6 students in research and animation on location in countries vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Before I introduce our speakers, just a few housekeeping notes and things to remember. We welcome and encourage questions from the audience. So if you have questions for our speakers, please drop them in the chat. I'm going to compile those and we will get to those questions at the end of the session. And with that, I will stop talking to you. But before I stop talking, let me introduce our speakers to you and welcome them to the Connected Inc. stage. I'd love to introduce Joshua Mosley, Professor of Fine Arts and Penn Animation as Research Lab co-founder, and 2 of our Animator researcher students, Melody Kuo and Annabelle Sumardi. Thank you all for being here. We are super excited to hear about your guys' creative journey. Why don't you guys take it away? Tell us a little bit more about yourselves. And I will hand the mic over to you, Josh. Thanks all.
Thanks, Megan. Melody, do you want to start? Do you want to tell us about yourself?
Sure. Hi everyone. I'm a senior at Penn studying communication and minoring in design and consumer psychology. So I joined the team since last winter and we all worked on episode 4. I have done research in the past and I also really want to pursue a career in design. And so I decided to join the team because it's the combination of both. So it contains elements of both research and animation.
Mm-hmm. Annabelle.
All right, I can go next. So I'm a 3rd year studying data science and design, and this project, as Melody said, was the perfect collaboration of analytics and design for me. And I joined the team this summer, and I've mostly been working on our 6th episode, which is still in the works as of now. And we were just so excited to be working with Wacom this summer. We even have one of the tablets in the office right now.
Mm-hmm. I'm Joshua Mosley. I guess I've been an artist for many years, and I've worked independently on producing animations that I show in art galleries and museums. And I've been teaching at the University of Pennsylvania since 2000. And over the years, we've expanded. I think when I started, I brought in some of the first computer animation classes, and now we teach mixed media and hand-drawn. And over the years, I've had a lot of students that have gone into the industry, but mostly the students that take my classes then go into the industry, or go into the industry as technical directors from the sort of computer science and engineering track. And so what happened a couple of years ago is I was teaching the hand-drawn animation class, and one of my students found a position with a colleague of mine, Simon Richter. Simon was starting to produce this series of animations called Poltergeist, and Justine and Simon and 3 other students produced the first episode of the Poltergeist series. After they published it, Simon and I met and we started to talk about collaborating and how we could produce more of these, how we could produce them faster, how we could make this bigger. And so by the time the summer rolled around, we had hired 6 students and we were trying to produce 2 episodes at the same time. And we were doing this remotely without traveling. And most of these videos are about issues outside of the United States. Issues where countries and coastal areas that are at risk of sea level rise from climate change and and these countries are developing strategies to sort of defend and protect the communities that live near the coast. These are the issues that we were dealing with, and there are a lot of these issues on the East Coast. But we've been Simon had been looking at the Netherlands, and so the first summer we had 2 teams going, and then this last summer, I think this is like the 3rd summer now, we decided to apply for grants and to look for an opportunity to take all of the students to the Netherlands so that we could interview experts there, see the sites that we were making the animations about, and draw from the landscape directly, so that the images would be the images that we were producing, the ideas and the sort of engagement would be more informed. We had been doing Zoom interviews this whole time, and this started during COVID, but this was it seemed like a really solid opportunity to travel and to do this. So in the meantime, what you're looking at here is our website of the Penn Animation as Research Lab, and there's different types of projects that we've done so far. One is that Simon and I have taught a environmental animation studio class where we've worked with different experts across the university that deal with issues, climate related issues like coral bleaching, the issues of sustainable tourism, and the issues of housing that are caused by climate change. And so that's a class that we co-taught together. The team, we've had 12 students that have worked for us so far, and usually the gig is about a 3-month long summer job that sometimes rolls into the year because the productions sometimes continue. And we took 6 students with us to the Netherlands. This is the alter ego of Simon. You see Simon Richter there. This is the alter ego of Simon that Simon and the first team created, called Poltergeist. And he's a sort of cartoon character that talks with Simon's voice. And then there's variations of this character that represent different countries. And so in this case, this is Indonesia. And then the videos, Simon's been writing the scripts, and the videos sort of take you on a journey through the issues and through the locations. And we're trying to draw as precisely as possible the kinds of buildings and landscapes that we're talking about in this. And so we've been using the internet quite a bit. We've been using photographs to draw from, but now this is the first opportunity that we had to go and really spend, so that we were there for a month. And we went to we were based in a small town called Haastrecht. And Haastrecht, what we did is we rented an Airbnb for the students. That was an old farmhouse, and it was a 2-story farmhouse. And this was a 25-minute bike ride. It was very remote. It was a 25-minute bike ride from a city called Gouda that you probably know because of the cheese. That a lot of, before I went, I thought it was called Gouda, but when we arrived in Gouda, we realized, okay, this is where we're at. So why did we choose Gouda? Well, if you look at this map, the red dot is Gouda, and it's in one of the lowest areas of the country of the Netherlands. And so on the right, this is a measuring kind of, I have a bug right here. Just kill that bug. This is a measuring stick, and so you can see that we're 5.3 meters below sea level. The 0 on the top there is the red line is sea level. And so we chose one of the lowest areas of the country, and the country has two issues that it's worried about. One is subsidence, the ground sinking, and the other is the sea level rising. And so as we traveled through the country, we met with experts, geologists, historians, scientists, all kinds of people. And this is one of the slides that we saw that shows the years along the bottom and the issues that cause subsidence. And one of the issues was adding embankments around the country. And then what happens is canals are formed and the water level lowers, and then the sort of soil is drained, and then the soil compacts, and they keep wanting to lower the water level so that the houses, the foundations of the houses can stay in good shape. And so and the farmers don't want the cows to be in squishy ground. So there's kind of a cycle of lowering the water table, and then the ground subsiding. And then the other issue is that these embankments and dikes need to be raised in case of tidal surges. So there's been really massively destructive floods in the country, and so here's a couple of plates that we saw in a museum with artworks that talk about the both the destruction and also the organization of the country to secure the coast and to protect from future floods. And so what that involves is pumping water out of lower ground and then pumping it up into higher ground. So back to Howdah, we were in this town called Howdah, and look at the water level. These are houses, and it's so they're keeping it so high so that the foundation stays. So the wood foundation, that the piles that are below the ground here stay in good shape and sort of support the houses so that they don't continue to sort of sink down. So the water level needs to be there, but at the same time, that's very risky. But they have control over it because they have these pumps. So I'm going to hand it over to Annabelle to talk about some of the other people that we met.
Perfect. So we met with a lot of different experts, one of them being Jim van Belzen, who you can see here sort of pointing to the oyster reef. And he is an estuarine ecologist at the Netherlandic Institute for Oceanic Research. And he's been experimenting with using these oyster reefs to naturally soften the tidal waves and reinforce the shore. And this was one of our first encounters with what is called a nature-based solution. So we were actually able to go out into nature and see the oyster reefs for ourselves, which was an incredible experience. And then next up, we got to meet with Martin Baptiste, who was a marine ecologist, and we met on the island of Texel, and I'm actually wearing a Texel t-shirt right now. And we had seen how sand could be used to reinforce the shore. But Martin explained to us how the amount of sand beneath the sea is limited and how it can actually disturb the marine life to be mining that sand. So that's why using sand to reinforce shores has a lot of limitations. And then next up, we got to meet with Mons Schapers, and he is a professor at the University of Groningen, and he helped us to understand how people lived on terps thousands of years ago. Terps being these human-built mounds of land that are safe from flooding because they're actually raised higher than the rest of the landscape. And he actually allowed us to hand pull up a core sample from one of these terps, and we were able to see sort of how they were constructed over the years. And he even showed us little things like how you can see when a natural disaster actually occurred because of the way the sediment layers changed drastically.
Okay, thanks, Annabelle. And Melody?
Yes, and then we also got a chance to meet with an amazing artist called Jeroen Helmer. So he's the illustrator for the ARK Rewilding Netherlands. And if you look at his illustrations, so they really look like one of those you see in like biology textbooks and encyclopedias. They're really detailed and professional, and they all have their own unique spatial depths. And he also talked about like the importance of different keystone species and how they support different ecosystems. So each of his work has a keystone species in the center with its like surrounding environment portrayed. And then we also got to tour his studio, which is filled with his drawings and sketches of wildlife. And I think he really offered us like a new perspective for our project, because it's like putting nature instead of humans into focus is an act of rewriting history. And his work advocates for like re-envisioning like the rewilding process. And after spending time at his studio, we also went to the lake beside his studio to sketch. So we also like drew birds, lily pads, trees, like everything we saw. and it was a really unique and invaluable experience. And then the other day, we also went to Utrecht University to meet with different like geographers there, and then they all gave us lectures about land subsidence and also showed us like various geodata. And then we also talked to Jana Cox. So she's an expert about dredging and sand. She gave a talk about river sedimentation in the Rhine River. And so the process of dredging is removing sediments from rivers so that large cargo ships can pass. And it is done mainly for economic reasons. But like boats are getting bigger and bigger, so we'll need bigger channels and even more dredging. And this has become a severe problem in the port of Rotterdam, which is the biggest port in the Netherlands. And then after her lecture, we also went to this lab in the geography department. And then it has this huge metronome machine that mimics an actual river. And then students and researchers there are able to like conduct actual experiments on there to examine like the fluvial dynamics and also the effectiveness of dam constructions. So these insights really helped me and also my teammates with our animation sequence, because like just by looking at the fluvial lab and understanding like the mechanisms behind sedimentation, we developed like a better picture of dredging operations and also some natural or human-made processes that is really important to what we're trying to show to viewers.
Thank you. So now I want to move into some of the goals that Simon and I have had for the project. I think initially Simon was looking for a way to publish the sort of different perspectives to a broader audience without publishing written papers. And so we've been able to reach more than 20,000 people with these videos so far, but it doesn't matter, I think, how many. What's really important is that they're the right people. They're the people who are making decisions in the countries, or who live in countries, who make decisions in other countries, who are looking to the Netherlands for how they're strategizing about sea level rise. So we know that a large percentage of our viewership is in the Netherlands, and we know that one of the most important forums is actually LinkedIn. So the videos get posted on YouTube, and then the discussion sort of begins on LinkedIn, and each of our videos we consult with a large number of experts. I've been working on the credits for this one. I think we have probably like 30 people that we've interviewed, that we've consulted with, that we showed rough drafts of the video to get feedback, to make sure that to make sure that the information that we're publishing is precise. And so those people end up being partners with us, and take the videos, repost the videos, comment on them, and so on. And so this discussion, this is really a sort of a conversation, something that advances the conversation on LinkedIn. So that's one of our goals. Another goal is that the students have an opportunity to work on something and model a new kind of career. So rather than maybe going into advertising or animation or whatever their other major might offer them right out of school, what we're hoping is that work like this, where the students are deeply involved in both the research and animation, will create a kind of artist that can both be involved in research and also the production of science communication. So that's what we're hoping, is that we're building a model for that. And then I think there's another aspect of what's happening, is that in some of these cases, we're bringing together 3 or more different researchers, and then the project itself is bringing them all together, these 30 people. And so here there's landscape architects, there's geologists and historians, and they're not all together in this picture. They're in 3 different pictures, but the project is bringing them together, bringing their perspectives together, and we're trying to interweave them into the video. So there's something called, I'm going to move to the next topic here. There's something called the principles of animation that Disney that the Disney animators introduced, but I'm gonna misuse this and call it animation principles. These are the principles that I think that that we've come across that are the ideas, the basic ideas of why we're using animation. So here on the left is a paper by one of the researchers that we interviewed, and on the right is the sort of consolidated image of the concept and the problem of there just not being enough space to mine sand, and that it being too destructive, and that there's a lot of people that want to do it, and it's needed for a lot of different things. And so that kind of all comes together into this animated picture. So one of our principles is that the drawing and animation can simplify complex scientific or sort of human problems in a very concise, memorable image. Another sort of principle is about transportation. This is narrative transportation. It's while you're watching the animation, you're in the sort of state of a passive viewer in a sense. You've been taken to another place. You can critically listen to it, but you're also you're fully immersed in it. So you've been in a way transported by the narrative, and you're in this other space. So that sort of the animation allows us to sort of get the attention and sort of hold the viewers sort of in an immersive way. So I think that's one of our principles. Here's another one. This is on a smaller scale, it's sort of a micro scale. Those are the frames of animation. And then somewhere in between those frames, when you're perceiving this kind of persistence of vision, when you're getting this motion, that's your brain. That's my poor drawing of the brain. That drawing of the brain is what you need to do between frames 1 and 2 and 2 and 3. And so that's a kind of engagement that's maybe more physiological. And it's and this happens as you sort of watch animation. There's something that grabs you. Now, this could be on any scale. It could be on the scale of frames per second, or it could be on the scale of shot to shot, or it could be on the scale of maybe episode to episode. It's the way that we put things together. So I wondered, and this is something I've been working on for a long time, like if we animate at 8 frames per second, it looks more choppy. But if we animate at 24 frames per second, it looks more smooth. But I think that our brains need to work more to see this kind of motion when we're at a lower frame rate, and that we become a little bit more passive on the other hand, but we don't have to work quite as hard if it's at a higher frame rate. So I don't know if 8 or 24 is better. We've been working in our production at a pretty low frame rate. Partly that's because we're producing 16 minutes of video in a summer, with 6 people. That's a lot of production, especially because we're all learning how to animate. Sometimes, I think almost everybody on the team has taken one animation class. But we're still learning about the production and about where we can be efficient and how we can do this succinctly. So what I'm wondering here is whether the continuity, and I hope that there's questions or comments about this afterwards, whether lowering the frame rate creates a higher level of engagement, and whether animation is sort of functioning somehow like this. The next one is about drawing. This is something that came up in my class last week. Which box is better? The one that I drew like 7 times on the right to try to make it look like the right square proportion, and it's still not right. And you can see the sort of wiggly lines that, and this I drew with the Cintiq on the right. The one on the left is an orthographic view that I found as a PNG file on Chrome. And it does flip a little. It's got other effects to it because I didn't draw the back. But is the one that looks like it's hand-drawn more sincere, and the one on the left is maybe more theoretical or geometric? Does the one on the right, is it more disarming, or does it feel like you have a one-on-one connection with the person who drew it? And the one on the left, maybe it has some other kind of affect. I'm not sure about this, but I'm believing that hand-drawn animation has a certain kind of disarming quality, and that's important. Okay, so the idea here is that as you draw things and you look at them longer, you can learn, your ideas get more specific, and you learn, and you sort of learn about the world. This was an experiment last week in my hand-drawn class. I had a pop quiz. On the left is, I asked everyone to draw Winnie the Pooh. I first asked them if everyone knew who Winnie the Pooh was, because I wanted to make sure that everyone knew who Winnie the Pooh was. On the left is drawing Winnie the Pooh without Googling it, Winnie the Pooh, without looking it up, just from your memory. So I had 20 different drawings of Winnie the Pooh. They all looked different. There was all different levels of specificity to it. So then I showed Winnie the Pooh on the screen for 5 seconds, turned it off, and had them draw it again. And then we did it again, showed it for another 5 seconds. And so every time that we looked back at this sort of reference image, even though it's something that's familiar, like if we're drawing trees, or if we're trying to draw water, or if we're trying to draw sand, every time that we look back at it after we've drawn it, we've taken what we knew and put it down on paper, put it down on our tablets. And then we go back and we look, and we can look for new details that we just couldn't look for before, because we had such basic ideas about what we knew. And so this experiment, I'm hoping I can continue with in other ways, in other drawing classes, so we can kind of watch how we learn through drawing. So our process in the animation starts with these research interviews and site visits. Then we move to drafting a script, which is largely Simon's work. And it involves discussion. Simon has a list of ideas that he thinks are important. We talk about those ideas. And then we move on to visual metaphors. And the students all did very sort of rough, loose, open-ended drawings based on what the topic was that we thought we were going to address in the 2 videos this summer. And then Simon looks at those drawings, and we talk about those drawings. We talk about the visual metaphors, and we moved, and Simon revises the script. And then we have a written script, and we use Google Docs, and all the students see it. And Simon has notes in that Google Doc about maybe specific locations that he's referring to, has the script beside it, the sort of detailed notes. And the students develop a storyboard. And usually to do this, we break up the script into sections, where it's almost like sub chapters, and then each student is working on maybe a fifth or a sixth of basically about a minute. Each student's working on about a minute of animation, storyboarding a complete chapter. And then what happens is we move on to recording scratch recording, so we have an idea of the exact timing, and we align the storyboard to that scratch recording, and we call that an animatic. Then we send the animatic, the video, to the experts that we've interviewed, and they give us feedback on, where we're precise, where we're wrong, where the image could be more descriptive, where there might be a better example if we pick a different location. And so then we revise the storyboard, update the animatic, and we move into the rough animation. So we, where that squiggly line is, everything before that we did in the Netherlands in 1 month. And then everything after it, we did in 2 months over the summer, almost everything. We did the rough, the fine, the color, and then the voiceover and the sound has been happening this fall. And so the voiceover and sound, I've been working on sound, and Simon is the voice. So here's a couple pictures of the experts that we met with. Here's some of the locations. And then here are some of the storyboard drawings that the students did. And so this is a mix of working on paper and then taking pictures with iPhones when we were in the Netherlands, and working on the Wacoms. And the idea is just to work as quickly as possible so we can get it into the animatic. And then we would review these kind of timed out storyboards. And this is in the interior of the farmhouse. You can kind of get a glimpse of what that looked like. And then we brought them into, so technically for animation, what we're doing is we're bringing the storyboards into Toon Boom Harmony. and we can draw the line work and create all of the animation. And then we can share color palettes. And so on the right, you see sort of a shared color palette that the whole team used that was based on previous episodes plus new colors for these last 2 episodes. And we developed those color palettes, and then we could share them so there would be sort of consistency across the sections, at least with color, even if everybody's drawing is a little bit different. We weren't trying to make every drawing look the same. It's okay if the style changes a lot, but the color and the sound and the voiceover is kind of what holds it together. And then what you see on the bottom left is, so we did a certain amount of drawing and for the storyboard, but then on the bottom left, we had to go back to the paper. We had to go back to the writing, to the science communication writing, to kind of find out exactly what would it look like, because we had sort of just had a rough idea of how things would be laid out in this coastal area with windmills and fisheries and and all the sort of components. And so we had to go back to the map to kind of analyze that more so that it could be drawn more precisely. And there on the bottom right, you see Simon in my studio recording the audio. So this is the end of the slides. And what we can do now is move on to the excerpts. We have 2 excerpts from our Poltergeist episode 5 that is almost done. Will be released in the next couple of weeks. And it's about 5 minutes long, 2 different little sections. And we'll take a look at that.
The hourglass is a common motif in the art of the Netherlands' somewhat tarnished golden age. It symbolizes mortality and the passing of time. Let's imagine the Netherlands in a pensive mood, pondering the hourglass, the flow of time, the changing climate, extreme rainfall, extreme heat and drought, sinking soil, the rising seas. How will the Netherlands protect its low-lying cities in the long term? Can the polders of its green heart and its Waddenzee Islands be secured? Will the sea once again reconfigure the coast? Will all that precious cultural heritage and happy industriousness eventually descend into the narrow funnel of destruction? In moments of reflection, it dawns on the Netherlands that its future can be measured in units of sand and the flow of sediment. For an industrialized, water-based consumer goods conveyance system, I think that's a fair description of what the Dutch have made of the Rhine and the Maas. Sand and sediment are the grit that hinders smooth operation. Remember that tarnished golden age? Colonies and trade, slave trade included, brought an abundance of wealth and goods into Dutch harbors. Dynamic rivers and tidal influx moved sand around in ways that hindered shipping and, from a human perspective, increased flood risk. Building dikes along the river resulted in greater sediment accumulations in downstream estuaries. The sea did its part by silting up harbors, putting profits from international trade at risk. Something had to be done. While rivers need to be deepened, which opens them up to storm surges and salt from the sea, beaches and dunes on islands and along the coast erode and are hungry for more sand. Gently sloping beaches with foreshores and high dunes are as integral to the Dutch Delta program as dikes and storm surge barriers. All of them require maintenance. The Dutch are getting smarter about coastal dynamics. They've become sand wizards. By tricking nature into doing some of the heavy lifting, they conjure up beaches and levitate dunes. Take the sand motor. 21 million cubic meters of sand were strategically piled up near an eroding beach. Wind, waves, and currents did the rest, distributing the sand according to their whim, just as the wizard had foreseen. Worldwide, it's regarded as a brilliant example of building with nature. It is. Barrier islands, such as Ameland, tend to wander. Erosion on one end, accretion on the other. The island of Schiermonnikoog has already crossed the border from one province to the next. To keep islands in place, the Netherlands introduces millions of cubic meters of sand at the eroding end and relies on currents and waves to nourish beaches while winds lift sand onto the dunes. Feeding time? Every 4 years. Meanwhile, there's so much sediment in the system, to keep the shallow channel for the Ameland ferry clear, 4 dredgers work round the clock. They can't even afford to cut their engines. Sand would clog the works. The Dutch Gold Coast. That's what dredging companies call these island beaches, a less than subtle hint that the Dutch have even colonized themselves. Sea level rise means rising profits, here and abroad, where an appetite for land reclamation fuels demand for sand and dredgers. As for the Netherlands, it reserves massive stores of sand in the midst of the crowded North Sea, where wind energy parks, anchorage areas, crisscrossing cables and pipelines, fisheries, and nature reserves assert their claims too. With each centimeter of sea level rise, the amount of sand required increases.
Yeah. So we can take questions now if there's any questions.
Absolutely. This is Megan again. Let me turn my microphone back on and pull up my document with questions. That was, first off, that was lovely. Thank you for sharing your guys' story and that animation with us. I know in the chat, there's a lot of shout outs and cheers for the Sand Wizard, and that coastal fist bump is now everyone's new favorite. For those in the chat, if you haven't had time to drop your questions, please feel free to do so. I'll start with our first question. Assuming that you want to continue this project, what other countries or regions do you want to bring attention to with your art?
I think we do want to continue this project, and there's 2 ways. One is that the animation as research lab, I think my hope is that we'll find other collaborators inside and outside of the university, so that the students can work on projects that deal with both basically environmental issues. And then the Poltergeist project, our plan is to expand the scope of it. And so we in episode 4 we focused on the similarities and differences between Indonesia and the Netherlands. And I think our next step is to look at the global South, and to work with an organization within Penn called Penn Global, to try to figure out what kinds of relationships we can build, and with experts and with artists in the global South, so that animations could be produced, not necessarily in our voice, but that we can sort of assist with the process, through I guess through collaboration, education, and dialogue, basically, to try to expand the scope of the project. So I think we'll continue to work with the Netherlands, and try to reach further.
Yeah, I love that. Another question is, who ideally is your target audience for these animations?
Well, it's I've been thinking about it because I came to the project, after the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that there was quite a lot of potential for high school, college people in the Netherlands who want to kind of hear an outsider's perspective, because Simon is both in some ways an insider, in some ways an outsider to the Netherlands. So we can look at it from a distance. The Netherlands consults on projects all over the world. And so there's many countries that are dealing with the same issues and are looking to the Netherlands because in terms of their approaches, they they're quite sophisticated solutions. And so I think that our audience includes people who are making decisions about what strategies their own countries should take. And I also think that I've noticed as we've visited universities that our colleagues at other universities that teach in the areas of like civil engineering planning and so on are using the videos, especially in the Netherlands. So there are the videos are being used in education and also in terms of policy. So that's our hope, and it may expand. But I think we want to make sure that it's that these are videos that are going to create the kind of change that's really sort of crucially important, drastically important now, and that's the main number one priority over let's just say like education for children. It's not that. It's for change.
I love that. I love that. This question might be geared a bit for Annabelle and Melody. Animation technically is extremely difficult. What was your favorite part of the whole project or process?
I feel like I can probably speak for most of the team that we had like a lot of fun working on the character design. So before we even started like with the actual script, so like in pre-production, we got the chance to sort of like sketch out our own little like metaphors and things like our visual metaphors, things like that. And because we were in the Netherlands, which is where Miffy was created. If you guys don't know what Miffy is, it's like a little like bunny character, cartoon character, and we all became obsessed with Miffy. Like by the end, we each had like, I have a Miffy lamp in my room now. We all have Miffy t-shirts and Miffy merch. But when we were making these like characters, we were like drawing out these little like Miffy like Dutch characters to put in the animation. It didn't make the final cut because we weren't sure about copyright rules. But we did still have like the fun, like the little scuba looking dudes in our animations, and like even just creating like Professor Poltergeist sort of like shape and things like that. We all were having so much fun collaborating on that part.
I love that. I love that.
I really like the storyboarding part, because a lot of our time and when we were at the farmhouse, we were mainly storyboarding on our own sections, but we also like shared our ideas. And then I remember how Annabelle and I we were brainstorming how to animate peatlands. So it's like a very specific structure, ground structure in the Netherlands, and it's like really it's for like underground water drainage. And then we came up with the idea of like animating this Dutch cake. So like the cake layers represent each core layers, and then we have like candles to symbolize like wind turbines. And then but it's like not used in our final production, but it's always fun to like explore different ideas and then like choosing what we want to put in the animation, because we really use a lot of like creative metaphors or like symbols in our videos.
I love that. Yeah, the cake metaphor feels perfect for describing all the different layers of sediment and stuff. Here's another question. This is a question that I had, is what are some of the benefits that you guys found using animation as a medium for addressing topics like climate change, which can be really difficult to sometimes explain into words? Yeah, I guess what were some of those benefits of animation?
So like one thing that we loved about working with animation is that we got to work on these like really extended visual metaphors in the storyboarding process. And like, for instance, in the clip we just showed, there's a part called like the Dutch Gold Coast. And in this case, that visual idea was developed like over time. And we didn't just want to purely illustrate what was happening on the islands, but with this like Gold Coast metaphor, we wanted to show how dredging was both creating profit and proliferating across the Netherlands while still being accurate to the actual dredging process. So like with little things, we wanted to be really accurate. For example, like the birds on the island, that's sort of a nod to how during dredging, they're actually bringing up a lot of marine life along with the sand. So that causes swarms of animals to come and feast on the organisms on land. And then like with the people lounging on the beach chairs, that's a nod to the profiting dredging company employees. So little details like that were really important to us when we were illustrating like the visualizations and using animation.
I love that. Very strategic and smart choices made. Here is, I think I'll take our last question, is what stylistic choices did the group make during the process to make the whole project seem cohesive? I know before you had spoke about the color palette. What were some of those other stylistic pieces and components that came into play?
Melody, do you want to answer that, or I can add some things, whatever you do.
Oh, I think we have like a specific stroke size, like the pen size. I think it's like 7, and then we decided, so in episode 4 we only decided on one single like size, but then for this one I think we have like a thick pen and then a thin pen to get more variations. So that was really fun to explore with. And then I think we did like you encouraged us to do like hand-drawn animations instead of like animating with like After Effects, like the keyframes. But then we sort of like prioritize using frame by frame representations.
Right. Yeah. So that was, I think, well, I mean, every time that we do this, it's kind of an experiment. So we've by coordinating color and line weight, that takes that makes at least the drawn elements kind of look a little bit more similar. We use camera motion and we do use some keyframing, but I was really pushing everyone to see if we could do as much animation by hand to kind of get to keep the image moving. I think also everybody was seeing each other's work because we use a shared cloud folder. And as we were working on the animatics, we would watch them together. So everybody was kind of seeing how things were working. And so I think that there's some cohesiveness that happens where someone sees someone else's finished color shot, and then they kind of, they know what level they need to bring theirs up to. And I think also with animation, there's a sort of economy of distributing your effort across your minute or your 2 minutes. So like you don't put all of the hard work in the first 10 seconds. You kind of bring it up and add animated details, in July and in August, and kind of bring up the level of interest where needed. And then we sometimes in discussions, we think of funny things that can happen, or we push things, change the cinematography a little bit. And so I think Simon and I have also given a lot of feedback along the way that that sometimes like we realize there's opportunities the way that the two clips fit together. There's opportunities to sort of refer back to something in someone else's clip. So we're always looking for these ways to sew this together even more so it seems unified.
I love that. And I do have one final question before we close out. Thank you, Pat. What was your biggest takeaway from your time in the Netherlands during your month-long visit?
We could each answer it shortly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have an idea, Annabelle?
This is like maybe not what you were going for, but the first thing I thought of was we actually like had this one moment in the Netherlands where like a lot of our equipment was stolen by a Groningen thief. And that really taught me to like, be safe, be careful wherever you are, and make sure to take care of your equipment. But one thing we actually got out of that is we were able to still like work with our like Wacom tablets, but initially we were all working on like the really big ones, and then we sort of each started switching into like using the smaller ones and like sharing and different things like that, which actually ended up helping our teamwork and making us more responsible as our little animation team players.
It's a good life lesson right there.
For me, it's definitely, I don't know, like the whole country is so different because I'm actually from Taiwan, and then like coming from like an East Asian country it's like I'm from Taipei, it's really city-like, and then now like going to Netherlands. It's like because we didn't really go to Amsterdam or like Rotterdam, like the big cities there. We went to like the farmhouse and also like very rural places or places with like the water crisis. So it's just really interesting to look at, like different landscapes. Like they're so pretty, but at the same time, it's like, oh, like these places are gonna sink if the government doesn't do anything about it. So it's just really cool because we also went to Utrecht University and then we met up with a TNO researcher and then he told me that UNESCO actually also went to Taiwan to do like a water management research, which is just really cool to see like the connections, which is really surprising and it also contributes a lot to what I'm learning about the world.
Mhm. Yeah, I found it amazingly. I mean, the layers. I guess it's kind of like that Winnie the Pooh example where at first I saw Haastrecht and we're riding the bike through it and this is probably my fourth time to the Netherlands, but as we met with experts, the sort of the layers that we uncovered and that we understood that like simultaneously we're 5 meters underwater, simultaneously we're standing on compressed peat, like and so I guess it's like the dimension of time, the dimension of history, the dimension of the energy that's being used to sort of allow us to stand here right now. Those kinds of those layers are not something that I would get just by traveling to the Netherlands and sort of taking a road trip through the country. I think the things that we saw sort of helped us understand the complexity, the sort of cultural, the cultural, geographic, sort of the housing issues, like the complexity and layers of that any country that's coastal will need to deal with in the near future.
Absolutely. And I lied one more question for you, Josh. Any collaboration opportunities with other universities or institutions across the world for future projects?
I'd love to hear about them. That would be great.
Yes, all of them.
Yeah.
Bring them to us.
Yeah, I would love to hear about those. Yes.
Well, I think that will wrap it up today. Thank you all for joining us. For more information on upcoming Connected Ink events, if you're looking for inspiring creative stories, tips, and techniques for improving your creative skills, make sure to follow Wacom on all of our social media channels. You can also head over to the community blog, which is community.wacom.com. If you happen to be in the Portland, Oregon area, make sure to visit us at the Wacom Experience Center. We'll drop some links in the chat for y'all to find information on us as well. Of course, thank you so much to Joshua, Annabelle, and Melody. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for showing us the videos. That was truly amazing. If y'all didn't think animation could do the work, it really can, and this is proof that it can. So thank you guys for sharing that with us. We're really excited to see the upcoming sessions and to follow along and see what you guys have planned for the future. If you're also interested in finding out current products and what deals are happening, any promotions, go ahead and head over to the community blog as well. There's a whole list of promos up there ripe for the taking. And lastly, our next Connected Ink stream will happen on November 15th and will feature the creators of Panchita, which is an amazing animated movie. It's a really beautiful story, so make sure to mark your calendars for November 15th. Turn on those notifications on YouTube so you can get reminders. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Again, thank you to our speakers. Thank you to the one with Bear, Sarah Jean in the back end for running our streams. Thank you to the chat, and we will see you guys online and at the next Connected Ink event. Thanks, y'all. Have a wonderful rest of your day.